Welcome back. All right, breaking news in the last half an hour or so. President Cyril Ramaphosa appointing a 6-member inter-ministerial committee to handle the allegations of COVID-19 procurement corruption. The Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, will chair the committee. The other members include the Ministers of Police, Finance, Cooperative Governance, as well as the Minister in the Presidency, Jackson Mthembu. Joined now by Sanusha Naidu, an analyst, a senior associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Sanusha, good afternoon to you. Certainly there has been such public outrage at these claims. There's been pressure on the President and everyone to act.
Indeed. Good afternoon to you, Stephen, and the viewers. Indeed, I think that the outrage and the actual anger, not just frustration, I think anger that has actually accompanied what we've seen in the last several days around the corruption, the complete unconscionable action by members both in the party and in government, and defrauding the state of what is essential PPE to help combat the COVID-19 infection rate and transmission and help the poor and the vulnerable, I think has really now produced this response by the President. But again, Stephen, the thing of the matter for me is that it's another committee. It's comprising of these 6 ministries, and if you read the actual release, the press release that came out, it says we want you to comply. There's no such thing as saying when's the deadline for compliance to release the list of tenders that went out by the other ministries. There's no kind of saying, well, this is what's going to happen if you don't do it by this time frame. Again, it seems to be a very polite way of asking people to do what they are supposed to be doing because that's their job.
There's another element here, and you've seen the ANC's National Executive Committee, and Pulemabe and I have had this conversation twice here on Newsfeed over the last few days about this particular issue. But it is not necessarily at this stage illegal for a family member of someone who holds high office in government or in the ANC to get a COVID-19 tender. It could easily be, no matter how immoral people may think it is, it won't be illegal.
Technicality, very important. I think the question here is what is the technicality and what is the legal framework and what's the conflict of interest? And we seem to be in a very, very difficult, if not uncharted territory in terms of whether or not these clear mandates have been set. This is why we're in the crisis that we are. This is the quagmire and the mess that we're precisely in, because we didn't set these clear parameters around conflict of interest. Is it illegal for a family member of somebody who holds a public office or has some kind of linkage to a person in a public office or in government or whatever sphere of government? Is it a conflict of interest? Is it illegal for them to tender? And of course, what are the clear mandates around legal frameworks?
So we have a situation where people are so angry. What other options are there for government? And politics is, of course, at play here hugely. There's actually not a lot, really, I would think, that government can do.
Yeah, so far it's been, let's try and approach it in a way where there's consensus, where people kind of, you appeal to their conscience, you appeal to their morality, their ethics, and let's hope they do the right thing. But if it continues to go in this way and it continues to become and become more acute and chronic than what we're currently seeing, then the anger is not going to be dissipated. It's not going to appease people any longer to think that you are basically taking us for a ride again. What is this committee going to be doing? What's the action? I think what people want to see is punitive action, and hopefully, out of this process again, something tangible emerges. But of course, the challenge here is, the President has now also set the terms of reference for the Zondo Commission, expanded those terms of reference, and so forth. So hopefully we'll see some cohesiveness and some coherence starting to play out with all of these kinds of interventions that are taking place.
There's an interesting note within the statement, and you refer to the technicalities of the statement, but the President says in the statement, it is signed by Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, he says, the committee will prepare a comprehensive report and I intend to release this information publicly. In a way, politically, but also correctly, and I think in the view of many people, what he's suggesting is he wants to try and make this as transparent as possible. And in our society, that's actually really important. People have a right to know what's going on, even if it might turn out that nothing technically illegal happened.
Yeah, you could even argue that it's about a polite way of name and shame. Which is quite an interesting way to do it, and says, in the interest of all transparency, in the interest of all of the fact that there should be, according to our Public Access to Information Act, everything should be out in the open, depending if it's not in the national interest or whatever in the context of national security. But obviously, this is one way in which it's going to be interesting as to how much will we actually put into the public domain in terms of full transparency, and how much of it will not come out in the public domain. And I think I don't want to sound like a pessimistic at this point, and I want to be an optimistic, but I'm trying to find my optimism in a lot of this at the moment, and it's a bit of a difficult swim at the moment for me.
I think for everybody at the moment, not just about corruption, but COVID-19, we're sort of looking for hope. Sanusha, I do want to talk a little bit about the National Treasury's role in all of this. Now, what they do is they send instructions to the provinces, and there was an emergency procurement situation which the Finance Minister Tito Mboweni told Parliament, and telling Parliament told us that, you know, this emergency situation was no longer going to be enforced. In other words, there would have to be proper adjudication committees. Now, I remember Gauteng at one point was actually going to have those committees sit in public. I think they might still do that, but they obviously can't during this time. It shows you how important those actual Treasury procedures were in the first place. The moment you rescinded them, to quote Mboweni, the thieves were at the door.
Absolutely. The moment you actually did not necessarily abide by those rules, whether it's the Public Management Financial Act and all of these things, that codes of conduct, the frameworks, the codes that you spoke about, the actual dynamics of accountability, then people started basically flouting the rules. And I think this is, again, something that has to be thought about, in the sense that this accountability is not something that is just there for some people and not for others. It's there for everybody. It's there to actually see what's going on and why it's going on. And of course, we've reached the zenith, I think, in this crisis. I think this COVID-19 and the whole, not just the PPE, but the whole COVID-19 process around a procurement, whether it's the relief budget or whether it's the social grant extensions, all of that has become part of this process in which people have to abide by the rules. And I think Treasury in itself is being, you know, for a long time, Treasury has its back against the ropes in terms of how different layers of government have seen Treasury and the role of Treasury. But of course, we know that this cannot be discarded or disregarded because of the vital role that these processes play in accountability.
There's been a series of very interesting reports. I think one was in Sowetan this morning, suggesting that the National Executive Committee of the ANC seriously considered setting up an anti-corruption agency that would involve, I'm really not making this up, Sanusha, prosecutors and police investigators. You and I have heard of an agency like that in the past before, haven't we? It had a sting in the tail.
Yeah, I think deja vu comes to mind here. Again, you know, I think there's this question between state and party. Very often we don't know where the state starts and where the party ends. And I think if you want to create that internal transformation agency, and you want to basically put that into action, then it has to be something that does not necessarily become blurred and enter into the terrain of grave matter in terms of where the state is also responsible as a responsible agency and an actor for the citizens' rights and so forth. So I think this, for me, again, is you can't have too many processes that are going to overlap but also complicate and end up with we seem to be doing a lot without doing many things or punitive action. I think that has been the crisis of the Integrity Committee or Commission in the ANC. If we saw last weekend how they came out and said some of the reports that they're requesting, some of the action that they have been recommending has not been implemented. So again, we're seeing this challenge between party and state.
I mean, this is something that's going on time and time again, and the question is, can the ANC renew itself? It says that it can. It says it's outraged, embarrassed by everything that's happened. The context around the passing of Andrew Mlangeni perhaps also created a sort of political headwind that the ANC sort of ran into in a way. The question from so many people is, can it change? And I know immediately that we have this conversation, people will mention the names of various people, including, I'm afraid to say, Esma Khashule.
Yeah, the question is, you know, where does the party go from here? Is it something that is salvageable? Is it something that can actually take forward what it has learned as an experience? What is the recalibration? What is the regeneration of the party going forward? And I think the challenge is really an internal ethical, moral issue for whoever joins the party. How committed are you to the public office that you hold, to the party that has this valuable over 100-year history, the anti-apartheid struggle, the whole nostalgia that brought this party together in terms of the Freedom Charter, and where does it go from here? So I think there's a lot that has to be done in terms of internal healing, self-healing, and where does it actually want to move in the future of a new generation that's going to take this party into the 21st century, because I think it's still not in the 21st century.
Sanusha Naidu, good to talk again. Thanks very much indeed. Senior Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. So that news then coming through just in the last little while from President Cyril Ramaphosa, appointing that inter-ministerial committee, 6 ministers who will be investigating the allegations of COVID-19 procurement corruption.